Okay, good morning. It is 11 a.m., so I think out of consideration for everyone, we would like to get started. So let me start by welcoming you to the Transportation and Climate Initiative Virtual Town Hall, brought to you today by the AAA Clubs of Connecticut, AAA Allied Group, and AAA Northeast. My name is Amy Parmenter. I'm the Manager of Public and Government Affairs for the AAA Allied Group, and my co-host is Alex Slatke, the Director of Public and Government Affairs for AAA Northeast. It's our hope that this event will help you to understand and answer any questions you may have, and also questions we, as the advocacy organization for the motoring public, will have about the governor's proposed Transportation and Climate Initiative program. We're hopeful there will be ample opportunity for Q&A after we hear from our speakers. We've already received many of your questions, and if you have questions throughout the presentation, please enter those questions in the chat box, and we will try to get to as many as possible. With that in mind, and in an effort to make the most of our time today, I will turn it over to Alex Slatke to introduce our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to have you here, and we're certainly happy to have Commissioner Katie Dykes and Deputy Commissioner Garrett Ucalito here. You'll hear from both of them. Commissioner Dykes is the Commissioner of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP. She's previously served as the Chair of the Connecticut Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, the Chair of the Board of Directors for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, which is very relevant to TCI. And before that, she served in the White House Council on Environmental Quality. So she's got a lot of great environmental experience, and Garrett has a lot of great transportation experience. He's the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Transportation. Before that, he was Transportation Program Director at the National Governors Association. He worked at the Office of Policy and Management, OPM, under Governor Malloy. He's worked for former Senator Lieberman. So we're really delighted to have them both here today. And without further ado, Commissioner Dykes, take it away.
Thank you so much, Alec and Amy, and appreciate the opportunity to be on this webinar today and to talk about the Transportation Climate Initiative program. We're just delighted to have this opportunity. I think folks may be aware that the Environment Committee held a hearing yesterday. I think it stretched to 12 hours, and heard from many, many different stakeholders, including many who support the Lamont administration's leadership on seeking to implement this program. And so we're going to just try to be brief in giving folks a kind of 101 on what the TCI program is, and hope to have the chance to engage in some Q&A and hear from folks their questions about what this program is and what it can mean for improving public health and modernizing our transportation system, and of course, most importantly, fighting climate change here in the state of Connecticut. The Transportation Climate Initiative program is, very simply, a program that will require polluters to pay for their pollution and take those payments and reinvest it in communities here in Connecticut in a way that will drive important benefits. Our transportation system is a major contributor to greenhouse gases and air pollution that contribute to both a worsening climate as well as significant public health impacts in our communities. And so in this program, by requiring polluters to pay for that pollution and the environmental and public health damage that they're causing, it will generate a significant amount of revenue, about $1 billion over the coming decade, that we can reinvest in clean transportation options that will better serve our communities. And when we talk about polluters, what I'm referring to are companies that sell petroleum fuels, specifically gasoline and diesel that's used on road at wholesale for use in the state of Connecticut. This is not a program that is, or an environmental requirement that we're putting on gas station owners or small businesses. This compliance requirement will be on those fuel suppliers who are selling these fuels at wholesale. And by requiring them to pay for the damage that their products are causing to our climate and to public health, that's where we'll be able to generate some of the revenue to help repair that damage across the state of Connecticut. So let me talk a little bit more if we go to the next slide about why we're so excited about this program, why we think it's so important for the General Assembly to enact legislation this year to authorize Connecticut to move forward with this incredible program. Of course, the primary driver is the need for urgent action on climate change. If you think about the atmosphere like a bathtub, we have already, over many decades of reliance on fossil fuels, across various sectors of our economy, we have already filled up the bathtub of our atmosphere, so to speak, with an enormous amount of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and others. And that is already contributing to significant impacts in changing climate. Based on the emissions that have already been released into the atmosphere, we expect that Connecticut will see by 2050 up to 20 inches of sea level rise, stronger storms, more frequent, longer droughts. We'll see increased frequency of flooding, a Superstorm Sandy level type event occurring not every 100 years, but every 5 to 10 years. And we're going to see an increase in hot weather in the summertime on a five-fold basis, from about 5 days of above 90 degrees per year to about 25 per year by mid-century. These are changes we have to prepare for. These are changes that are happening based on what's already been emitted into the atmosphere. And what we're trying to do with this program is help prevent more emissions from going into the atmosphere and making these already locked in impacts much worse after mid-century. Because even though the bathtub, as I mentioned, is already quite full, we're still pouring more water into it. The tap is still on. There are still significant amounts of greenhouse gas emissions that are going into the atmosphere every single day. And the transportation sector is a major contributor to that. So while we are advancing common sense solutions to help protect and prepare communities from the impacts of climate change that are already in place, we have to take urgent action within this decade to make major reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, or else these impacts will become uncontrollable and kind of runaway climate change processes will go into effect after mid-century that will be near catastrophic and very difficult to reverse. So that's why it's so urgent for us to take action now. And we have that possibility here with the Transportation Climate Initiative Program. Next slide. Of course, anytime we talk about solutions for climate change, especially in the transportation sector, it's great to point out what comes along with it, because all the measures that we can implement to help reduce the amount of greenhouse gases produced from combusting petroleum fuels in our vehicles will also reduce the amount of air pollution that those same vehicles are imposing on our communities. Transportation emissions have a significant linkage to respiratory illness, cardiovascular damage, developmental and reproductive harm that we see in high concentrations in our state. We sit at the proverbial tailpipe of the nation. Much of the air that blows into Connecticut is already has high levels of air pollution. And then we compound those high levels with significant amounts of air pollution that's coming from combustion of gasoline and on-road diesel fuels from our transportation sector. And those emissions are especially concentrated in communities along our transportation corridors, I-95, I-84, communities of color, lower income communities that can ill afford to bear the additional costs in terms of public health impacts from breathing this polluted air. So taking action to address climate change is also going to have the companion benefit of helping to lessen the public health burdens that many communities are suffering in this state. Next slide. So, of course, we have Connecticut has a long history of leadership on addressing climate change and addressing air pollution. We have requirements, mandates in state law, including a requirement to cut greenhouse gas emissions 45% across our economy by 2030. These are ambitious and very important reductions that need to occur. And we need the tools to be able to achieve them. And without programs like the Transportation Climate Initiative program, it's difficult to see how we can meet those statutory requirements for 2030. We also have federal requirements that we need to meet with respect to air pollution, for example, because Connecticut is out of attainment of federal standards related to air pollution. It's critical for us to have tools in place that can help us cost effectively reduce transportation sector emissions to meet and become in attainment with those federal air quality standards. Go to the next slide. So the Transportation Climate Initiative program that we're seeking to implement today is something that has gathered strong support from many members of the business community, from environmental advocates, from university professors and other professionals, as well as many agency commissioners that have participated in the Governor's Council on Climate Change, which Governor Lamont relaunched in September of 2019. In January of this year, the council issued the report that you see on this slide, identifying 61 recommendations for near-term actions that the state can take to help improve resilience and, again, turn off the tech and prevent more emissions from going into the atmosphere in a cost-effective way. And adopting the Transportation Climate Initiative program was one of the recommendations prioritized by the Governor's Council. Next slide. So one of the really exciting opportunities that we have in advancing the Transportation Climate Initiative program is that we can not only make strides in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution here in our state, but by taking a leadership position on moving this program forward, we will also be able to catalyze other neighboring states to similarly implement this program. The Transportation Climate Initiative program will work on a regional basis. We have last December, the Governor Lamont signed this MOU together with Governor Baker and Governor Raimondo and Mayor Muriel Bowser of DC. All four of our jurisdictions committing to work together to collectively implement this program. So taking action now to implement this program will mean getting those commitments from other states to make compatible and similar reductions as well. So it's a huge opportunity and a huge win for our states to be able to move forward collectively in seeking to implement this program. There are a number of other states that have also been part of the design and discussions around this program over the last 2 years, and while not all of them signed on to the MOU to seek to implement the program right away, they are continuing to be at the table and in the discussions around the design of the program. And I am very optimistic that over time, as the four jurisdictions, the charter members, move forward to implement this program, that will enable more jurisdictions to join over time. That's the track record that we've had with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a very similar program that we've been implementing successfully for power plants over the last 15 years. We continue to have more states joining that program in recent years, and I expect that will be the same for TCI. So next slide. Great. And it's, of course, as I mentioned, the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state of Connecticut. About 38% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. And so that's why it's so important for us to have a tool like TCI to drive these emission reductions in order for us to meet our economy-wide goals. At the same time, the transportation sector is also responsible for 67% of air pollution generated here in our state. So for that reason, also critical for us to have this tool. We know, and by moving together with our neighboring states, just thinking about what this opportunity means. While Rhode Island and Connecticut and Massachusetts may look small, our states represent 80% of the GDP of New England, about 73% of transportation greenhouse gas emissions in the New England region, 76% of motor vehicles. So this is a major step forward in reducing emissions across our participating jurisdictions. At the same time, by doing this on a regional basis, it will ensure that our states will have the revenue available to invest in things that can strengthen our shared transportation networks. Thinking about those transportation corridors, I-95, 84, 91, that we share with our neighboring states, and the ways that we'll be able to help build out fast charging stations and other supportive infrastructure to make Southern New England the hub of a new clean transportation system in the country. And so speaking of those investments and what this program can mean for transforming our transportation system, I want to pass, if we go to the next slide, I want to pass the mic virtually over to Garrett Ucalito, Deputy Commissioner at DOT, DEEP and DOT have been working hard on this program collaboratively, and I'm pleased to have Garrett speak to the nuts and bolts of how the program works and how these investments will transform our transportation system.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm going to walk everyone through a TCI 101 to start, and then talk about some of the investments that can be made with the proceeds. So at the most basic level, TCI is a market-based program to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from gasoline and on-road diesel. And how it works is it sets a binding cap on carbon dioxide emissions from those fuel products in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and DC. And each year that cap is going to go down, getting smaller, guaranteeing that we see a 26% reduction in CO2 emissions in our states. And so this works in concert with other investments that our states are going to be making and other policies will be moving forward with. This is critical, and it's been, it's really successful with RGGI, as well as the California Cap and Trade program. Next slide. So how do we make sure the pollution actually declines, and how do we make sure that we actually generate the proceeds? So large gasoline and diesel fuel suppliers are going to be required to purchase emissions allowances for the pollution caused by the combustion of fuels they sell in our states. Each allowance represents 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide. So the total number of allowances available each year is going to decline, resulting in less transportation pollution. This actually is going to incentivize innovation in the marketplace, because the fuel suppliers operate in a competitive marketplace with a growing diversity of alternative fuels like hydrogen and electricity. Those price signals at the market, at the auction, are going to spur that innovation for those regulated entities, so encouraging them to reduce the carbon content of the fuels they sell. This is going to allow us to have a uniform price throughout our participating states. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut are all going to have that same marketplace, those same auctions, to allow us to not be competing with one another in the fuel supply sector. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we consistently get is, okay, so you're going to have these auctions, how much money is going to be raised, and then what's that going to mean for me as a driver? So it's important to talk through what the reality is. So as TCI was being developed, there were a whole host of different policy scenarios being produced, modeled, and so what we really want to talk through is what is on the table today with our states, what we've decided to move forward with, and what it means for Connecticut. The policy and program design that we put forward as the 4 jurisdictions would result, based on our modeling, an emissions budget, as you see here, starting in 23 with 13.5 million CO2 tons. And over time, that's going to continue to go down. As a result, the allowance price, what we're projecting the price of those allowances will go up as the supply of allowances goes down. As a result, the first year of the program, 2023, we'll have, for Connecticut alone, $88.5 million for us as Connecticut to invest in transportation, in clean transportation, and emissions reduction technologies. Over time, as the price of the allowances goes up, we'll see more proceeds, more revenue coming to Connecticut. And so by the year 2032, we'll have $117 million for Connecticut to invest in our state. Assuming the regulated entities, the wholesalers and the distributors, pass along 100% of the costs of this program to comply with the program down to the gas stations, and then the gas stations pass it along to the consumer, all the modeling shows that it would result in a 5-cent increase beginning in 2023. Not this year, not next year, 2023 when the program's up and running. That's if 100% of the costs are passed along. So we're trying to be conservative and base it on that 100% figure. Over time, by 2032, it will be a 10-cent increase. So it's important to stick with these numbers. These are the numbers that all of the detailed modeling we've done based on the program that we released in December would potentially result in. Next slide. So I do want to touch a little bit on some of the other protective measures we have in place. So because future emissions and emission reduction costs are subject to a whole host of factors, we see that in the marketplace today with the gas prices and diesel prices. We wanted to make sure to protect consumers from uncertainties. And TCIP is designed with a built-in safeguard called the Cost Containment Reserve, which would automatically kick in to limit the impact of the program on prices of allowances, which would result in prices at the pump. It also has a mechanism called an Emissions Containment Reserve to take advantage of the opportunity to reduce emissions at lower than expected cost. And then finally, we have something called program review, which all of our jurisdictions would periodically conduct a comprehensive and transparent review of the program to evaluate the costs and benefits, update our modeling, engage with the regulated entities and other stakeholders, and make adjustments and improvements to the program. And this is all based on current best practices currently underway with the RGGI program, which has worked fabulously for our state and for the entire Northeast region. So I want to make sure people realize, we basically are putting in place, you see on the bottom left there, some guide rails, or if you go bowling and you put bumpers in the lane so your bowling ball stays within the lane. That's what those CCR and ECRs are, to ensure that we do not see higher than expected impacts to consumers. Next slide. So now I want to talk about how we can invest these funds, which is for the DOT. Really, there's so much demand for amongst all of our communities, amongst all the public, for making smarter, cleaner investments in our state to provide more affordable access to clean transportation, advance equity for overburdened and underserved communities, and reduce pollution. So, talked a little bit about the 89 million the first year going to 117 million in 2032. But there's a whole host of opportunities. So from expanding broadband and high-speed wireless internet in rural and low-income areas to allow for greater teleworking, repairing existing roads and bridges, providing safer bike lanes and sidewalks. These are just some examples. And if you go to the next slide, I want to talk about a little bit more depth with some graphics there. So you see on the top there some examples of trail investments. Trails in Connecticut are extremely popular. We know it improves quality of life. People, we know it encourages economic development around those trail hubs. And you see them, if you try and get out on the Farmington Canal Trail on a nice day, it's going to be crowded. And we're looking to expand that all across the state and finish the East Coast Greenway in Connecticut. Roundabouts, that's something that, drivers don't even think about how environmentally and safety beneficial a roundabout is. You have an 80% reduction in serious crashes, and you have about a third reduction in emissions just from converting an intersection into a roundabout. Next slide. Traffic signal modernization, another passive investment that we as the state can make by investing in modernizing and synchronizing our traffic signals, thereby reducing idling and reducing emissions. EV fleet conversion, so that means for public transit buses, truck fleets, commercial truck fleets, school buses are going to be key. Which is going to be a great opportunity to convert school buses in Connecticut to EV, as well as state and municipal fleet vehicles. Expanding and improving public transit, not only the existing transit systems that we have, expanding hours of operation, making them serve the modern day workplace, as well as the workplaces that have moved around since they were first put in place, but also expanding public transit to serve unserved areas, using some microtransit in rural and suburban areas to ensure that all residents of Connecticut have freedom of mobility. Next slide. So final thing on investments here, EV charging infrastructure, that's going to be key. We've seen the marketplace indicators. We've seen the auto manufacturers indicate they're moving towards EVs. We need to make sure Connecticut is ready for that. And we need to make sure that EV charging is plentiful, it's accessible to all residents, not just in certain areas of the state. And then lastly, some graphics there showing some of the investments Connecticut's already made for more visible crosswalks, sidewalk improvements, bike lane installations, and we know there's great demand all across the state for more of that, and we're excited to be able to help municipalities do that in their communities. So next slide. I think Commissioner Dykes, I'm going to turn over to you to wrap up on benefits and next steps.
Great. Well, thank you, Garrett. So just to underscore, I think that there's been, a lot of coverage and interest in terms of the consumer impacts of this program and what it might mean for gas prices if the fuel suppliers pass on all of the compliance costs. The thing that to really underscore is that this program, the benefits of this program will far exceed the program costs. We have done extensive modeling of those costs and benefits, including, of course, the primary driver for the program is to ensure that we can achieve a 26% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Also, the investments associated with these with the program will provide significant enhancements in terms of safety, as Garrett mentioned, in terms of improving our transportation infrastructure and reducing injuries and fatalities. Also, so important for families in the state who are struggling with respiratory illness and overburdened by the impacts of air pollution. This program will also reduce premature deaths and asthma cases, for folks who have had to take a day off work to take their kid into the ER because of an asthma attack. I mean, this has had, we know that the burdens of respiratory illness and air pollution are very pervasive, and they impact our kids, our families, and our economy. And so we're really excited about the benefits that will be provided, especially in communities that are overburdened by air pollution, communities that have been underserved by our transportation system. And overall, our modeling shows that this program will have significant net positive economic benefits for the state. And that's really why this makes so much sense for Connecticut to move forward with this program together with our sister states. If you go to the next slide, I just, this is, as we've mentioned, because these burdens of air pollution and the climate crisis are felt disproportionately across communities, it's really important that the TCI program has at its center a commitment to address equity and environmental justice. And so the MOU that Governor Lamont signed included a commitment to invest at least 35% of the proceeds from this program to support communities that are overburdened by air pollution or underserved by the transportation system. And to ensure that we follow up on that commitment in a meaningful way, the program also commits to establish an equity advisory board, including residents of those overburdened and underserved communities, to provide input and advise DEEP, DOT, and OPM on how these investments should be allocated. It's really, the great thing about TCI is that there's so much flexibility in terms of the types of measures we can implement to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And with this equity advisory board and a commitment to annual reports that provide more transparency, measuring the impacts of these different investments, we can ensure that the choices we make about where to put these dollars at work are achieving, are matching the priorities of our communities here in the state, and are delivering on a more equitable and a more just transportation system for our communities, especially those who have been ill-served by it over the years. We go to the next slide. I wanted to speak briefly as well, that, through this public engagement process that we've had in the design of the program over the last 2+ years. We've had a number of different listening sessions that we've convened on a multi-state basis with all the jurisdictions that have been involved in the planning. And we've heard from so many businesses across the Northeast and here in Connecticut that are supportive of this program. They recognize how important addressing climate change and improving air quality is for economic competitiveness and for the financial health of our state. And so we're really pleased to highlight some of the supportive comments that we've received from businesses across through the development of this program. And next slide. We've also heard from many advocates, from many community leaders, that they similarly are supportive of this program and understand how transformational it will be for our transportation sector and for communities in the state of Connecticut and across the Northeast. Next slide. So I want to just note that we are, of course, Connecticut can't move forward with this program unless we are given the authority to implement it by the General Assembly. And so for that reason, after signing on to the MOU last December, Governor Lamont submitted a governor's bill for consideration in this legislative session. We're really honored to have the opportunity to testify yesterday before the Environment Committee as it considers this proposal. If we are successful in obtaining authority from the General Assembly to move forward, DEEP would then initiate a rulemaking process to adopt the regulations needed to implement the program. And our hope would be to manage that adoption process so that we could successfully receive approval for the regs and be able to participate in the beginning of the program, which would start in January 2023. So we're excited about the progress to date and hope we'll be able to keep to this time schedule. If you go to the next slide. I just want to say we really appreciate the opportunity to share more about this program. We know that there have been a lot of questions that have come up from various stakeholders about, what this will mean for communities. We're looking forward to having the opportunity to speak to both, the support that we've received, but also to some of the questions that have been raised about this program and what it means. I think there's a lot of myths that are circulating out there, and it's really important to have a debate on the program that we're actually proposing, as opposed to hypothetical or kind of mischaracterizations of this program. This is an environmental compliance program intended to cap emissions and address climate change and air pollution. It is not a gas tax, for example. It also, there's been questions around whether this program will enable, will put other states or jurisdictions in control of the investments that we would make here in the state of Connecticut, and that is simply not true. This would, while we get a lot of benefits in being able to administer the program on a regional basis through jointly conducting the auctions where the allowances would be sold. All of the revenue that would flow to Connecticut from this program will be completely within Connecticut's discretion and control in terms of how we would allocate that. There are so many benefits of this program, and we understand the need to thoroughly vet and make sure that folks accurately understand what this program means. And I'm very confident that it will be transformative for our transportation sector. And we look forward to the dialogue today and the opportunity to answer any questions folks may have. There's a lot at stake and a lot that we can do here in our state to better serve our citizens and our businesses if we are able to get the authority to move forward with this program. And so for that reason, we look forward to the dialogue.
Great. Thanks so much, Commissioner Dykes and Deputy Commissioner Ucalito. Lots of information to digest there, and I would assume a lot more to come. AAA, as you know, is the advocacy organization for consumers, for the motoring public. So that will be the focus of many of our questions today. And so let's get back first to the concept of it being a gas tax. You say that you are projecting conservatively an increase in gas prices 5 to 10 cents, let's say. We've seen other reports, other groups that say it's as much possibly as 17 cents a gallon. How do you, why is there that discrepancy? What is it that they are measuring or taking into account that you believe to be inaccurate?
Well, thanks for that. So first, to clarify, this is not a gas tax. In the sense that it's an environmental compliance program. There are lots of environmental compliance requirements that companies have, and to the extent that it's up to them in terms of how they choose to comply with the program and what strategies they want to implement to achieve compliance. So, this is because, that's one of the beauties of this environmental compliance program is that it is it leverages market forces. It provides a lot of flexibility for those fuel suppliers to employ strategies that can minimize the cost of compliance with this program. For example, a fuel supplier could choose to blend in biodiesel, into their diesel blends, for example, to reduce the amount of emissions. There are so many different things that they can implement to help offset the cost. So for that reason, unlike a gas tax that just collects a certain amount and it's fixed no matter what you do, this program works compatibly with the market to help reward and support strategies that fuel suppliers can implement to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce air pollution. That's really our goal. So that said, we conduct detailed modeling as we're considering how to design this environmental compliance requirement. And in that detailed modeling, Amy, we looked at all kinds of things. We projected out over the next decade what are, what vehicle miles traveled trends are going to look like. What do we expect fuel prices to do? What do we expect the cost of electric vehicles to be over time? We've seen, a lot of transformation occurring just in the last few weeks. As some of the major automakers have made very ambitious commitments to phase out manufacturing of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035 for GM, by 2030 for Volvo. So we factored that into our modeling. And with that, picture of what we expect the emissions and the prices to be in the transportation sector, then we applied and made decisions around the level of stringency for this program that affects what we expect the allowance prices to be, the cost of compliance, and then within that, the associated impact on consumer prices if fuel suppliers choose to pass on all of those costs. And so that's how we came up with that target of about 5 cents that we anticipate this compliance cost to be from this program associated with what prices consumers might see at the pump. And as the program, again, this is an environmental program. It's not intended just as a tax to generate revenue, but an environmental compliance requirement. Our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and so for that reason, the cap tightens over time. So there will be fewer emission allowances for sale, 10 years into the program. As we make progress to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we expect that will make the price of allowances a little bit more valuable, and so therefore that consumer price impact increases over time in our modeling to about 10 cents. As Garrett mentioned, the goal of this program is not to jack up gas prices and cause people to drive less. That is not the objective. We want to reduce, we do not want to compromise mobility in our state. What we do want to do is achieve greenhouse gas emissions through the investments that we make with the revenue from this program, investing in things that help people reduce their emissions. That's how this program works, not by trying to have a significant impact on gas prices. So our modeling confirms that the program will have a price of impact of about 5 cents to 10 cents over the coming decade. And then, as Garrett mentioned, we have the cost containment reserve. We have designed these guardrails on the program to prevent the price from going too high and to protect consumers from that type of impact should market conditions turn out to be different from what we've modeled. And so that cost containment reserve in the first year of the program would kick in at 9 cents and prevent those gas prices from going higher. So we have seen opponents of this program, citing to outdated and refuted studies to assert that this program will cost or will cause an increase in gas prices of 17 cents. The modeling the study that they are citing is simply not supported. The study looked at exploratory caps, not the cap that we are moving forward with the TCI program. The study cited several outdated and unreasonable assumptions, such as EV battery cost projections are much higher than actual current market prices, outdated estimates of vehicle miles traveled trends, unreasonably pessimistic estimates of the impacts that we'll have from the investments of these dollars. And most important, so all of those, when you turn the dials on the modeling in that way, it produced a really exaggerated projection of what the cost of the program would be. And most importantly, Amy, the study that the opponents are citing did not consider the effect of the cost containment reserve, which would kick in at the 9 cent level. So our goal is, as we've designed this program, is to drive emission reductions through the investments of the proceeds. We have carefully vetted the program. We believe that the consumer impact will be in the 5 to 10 cent range over a decade, and we have a cost containment reserve mechanism in place to prevent the prices from going anywhere close to the 17 cents that opponents have been citing. But unfortunately, these numbers have shock value, and I don't know why they're still getting such circulation, but it's really helpful for us to have the opportunity to explain exactly why we believe that these numbers are not consistent with how we've designed this program.
Thanks, Commissioner. That's actually a great jumping off point to questions that we've received about that cost containment reserve. I know you mentioned that kind of kicks in at 9 cents. Reading the MOU, it seems like there's kind of that trigger price for the allowances that causes the containment reserve to go into effect. So how do you determine that trigger allowance price? And then once the program is underway, how do you actually measure the effect of TCI on gas prices when we know so many factors contribute to the price of the pump?
Mm-hmm. Great questions. So to your first question, how did we model, or how does the CCR kind of function, and how did we design that? If you think about it, the CCR is sort of like the cost containment reserve. It functions like a safety mechanism, almost like the airbags on your car. Our goal is not to have prices, to design a program that ensures that the cost of complying with the program will, result in consumer impacts around that 5 cent level. We have designed the program intentionally not to produce prices that are at the 9 cent level. We don't want, if we find the CCR is really meant to be like a safety mechanism and a safety valve to prevent in case there are unintended circumstances that would cause prices to be that high. If we see that the CCR is triggered, right, in an auction, it would be a strong signal to the states participating in TCI that we need to go back into a program review and tweak the cap, right, to ensure that we can rebalance given market forces and ensure that compliance costs are more within the range that we've been expecting. We are not, it's not our intention, you know, you wouldn't drive around with your airbags inflated on a permanent basis. That's really how this mechanism works. Listen, this is not a hypothetical kind of mechanism that we're talking about. We have real world experience from the RGGI program of utilizing a CCR to help moderate or protect against unreasonably high prices. And in RGGI, the CCR has been triggered only twice. We've been very, you know, it's shown to be very effective in helping to prevent volatility in prices. And it's been very informative to our program design in the program. So we're borrowing from a mechanism that has already proved very successful in protecting against high prices. And as I've been talking about the CTR, I have forgotten your second question.
It's all right. That's
so sorry.
It's all good. The second question was, I mean, you kind of have the modeling and a forecast perspective, but once the program's underway, how will you be able to measure the effect of TCI on gas prices when so many things go into it? I imagine if New York doesn't join, you could kind of look at, you know, what happens in Greenwich versus Portchester or Brewster versus Danbury. But I think, you know, if they do join, then it seems like it would get more complicated.
Sure thing. So the allowance prices, of course, will be public. We share the results of allowance, what the clearing prices are in our quarterly auctions. In RGGI, for example, all of the participating states review those auction results after every single auction, and the allowance price is published. And so based on the allowance price that clears in an auction, we can then, you know, make some estimates, assuming that 100% of the compliance costs are passed along, of what the, you know, how much of that allowance price is translated into a consumer gas price increase. But that said, you know, Alec, I think the really critical point that is, you know, not just the commitments that we have to communicating about consumer costs associated with the program, but also the transparency that this program will provide around the benefits. We measure those benefits in terms of air pollution reduction, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, economic activity associated with how we're investing these proceeds. We are committed to measuring those as well. And we do that in RGGI today through an annual proceeds report that provides updates in terms of the net benefits that we receive from the RGGI program. And it's been just incredible to see the multiplier effect. You know, the costs of the RGGI program are far outweighed by the benefits that we have achieved through reinvestment of RGGI proceeds, and the same will be true for TCI. Lastly, I want to say that while New York has not joined us in moving forward to implement the TCI program at this time, they continue to be part of our dialogue and discussions, and you know that leaves open the possibility that they, along with other states in the Northeast, could join over time. I will also say that New York's gas taxes are much higher than here in Connecticut. So even if, as we factor in the TCI program impacting gas prices here in the state, we would still expect that gas prices will be higher in New York, even if they don't join TCI because of their much higher gas taxes.
Great. I wanted to ask some questions about the funding, and specifically who will control the money that comes in as a result of TCI, because you've talked about a lot of possibilities for what could be done with the money. Let's say on average, it looks like about $100 million a year. And, you know, with all of the things that you have lined up as possibilities, that's not really a lot of money. Let's say if we want to focus on you know, putting roundabouts in somewhere, or a lot of these programs, transitioning the fleet to be all EV, costs a lot of money. So the question specifically is, who will make the decisions as to what money is spent and how? Will it be OPM? Will it be DOT? Will it be the Equity Advisory Board? Who's going to make the decisions about how that money will be spent?
Thanks, Amy. Thank you for that question. So, the way the legislation reads that was introduced by Governor Lamont has the DOT and DEEP with the approval of OPM expending the funds. However, in there you have a specific set aside of funding for at least 35% has to go to the benefit of overburdened and underserved communities. So those communities overburdened by air pollution, underserved by the transportation sector. And that's the floor. We certainly expect it will probably be a greater benefit to those communities as well. And we are in discussions with a lot of advocates and interested parties about ways we can work on that language to make it stronger and have an even greater benefit. So the way the legislation reads is it has the Equity Advisory Board help advise our agencies, help advise government on where there's the greatest need for those funds to be invested, what those potential uses are in those communities where there is the need, because every community is going to be different. And, there's going to be heightened awareness and reporting structure around these funds. To such a degree, I honestly am not aware of other funding streams that will have such visibility and transparency around the decision-making process and the use of the funds. So it is going to be a discussion within government and with the communities impacted. You're right, some things are going to cost more than others, but you also have other funding streams. It's almost like a capital stack, right? For if there are, if a community wants to convert their school bus fleet over to electric, TCI is not the only opportunity. TCI can serve as the match to some federal grants. Or, if a community wants to build a bike path, they can go to some of the other funding opportunity programs that are out there, go to some nonprofits, use TCI to to act as the other funding source. So it provides another tool for our state to begin to fill those holes where they exist. Because we know that local governments and a lot of the neighborhood associations and activist groups, they don't have a funding stream to support a lot of these types of investments. We're hopeful the Biden administration is going to increase funding for low-no grants to convert public transit fleets to EVs, to increase funding for EV charging infrastructure, and to increase funding for air quality monitoring and for bike trails and for sidewalks. But we know that we at the state level and the local level often have to take on those burdens ourselves.
So that's a perfect segue to another question that we've received, which is about that 35% that are going to that underserved or overburdened communities. How do we make sure that that's money that's new, that's in addition to the current expenditures? Because we know that you're already doing work with transit and with bike paths and things, and with the cheaper rebate to get people to have incentives towards electric vehicles. So how do we make sure this is money that's kind of on top of what's already being spent?
So I'll start, and then Katie, feel free to jump in if you want. I think it's all about transparency and awareness, right? And allowing the Equity Advisory Board, which will be overseeing this, to provide them with the independence and the participation that they need to be the ones to flag. We at the DOT have our capital program. Everything is published on our website, and for everyone to know exactly how we intend to spend our capital dollars every year, as well as our budget dollars. Same thing with DEEP. So it's easy for us to work with the Equity Advisory Board to share that information, and then for them to build an additional list of investments, right? So that level of transparency and awareness is going to be critical. Katie, I don't know if you have anything to add there. So.
No, and I'll just say that we're, through the efforts that we've made over the last couple of years to support cleaner transportation options, we're very fortunate to have programs like the Cheaper program, which provides direct rebates for passenger vehicle purchases and helps to make electric vehicles more affordable. And what this program will do is it will be able to put more dollars to work through some of the programs that we've already established, through some of the framework that we've already built. We have, the cheaper program, right now, we're able to fund rebates, with a couple of million, $3 to $5 million per year. That's certainly, that's fantastic. But think about the scale of electric vehicle deployment that we could support if we had more dollars to provide through that program. I've heard from companies, a company in the Hartford area, a business owner who operates limousine and van service up to the airport, to Bradley, very interested in shifting to electric. We don't currently have the ability to scale up incentives for businesses to convert fleets over who are interested in electrification. Even if you're not a big climate advocate, we're hearing from businesses who are in that space, who see a lot of the benefits of shifting to electric vehicles because their maintenance costs are much lower, and as the fuel costs are competitive, and so there is a net savings for a fleet owner if they shift over to electric vehicles. So this program, I think folks are really waking up to the cost savings and what that can mean for their bottom line and their competitiveness. This program will enable us to support the scale of interest to really dramatically increase the ability for us to partner with businesses, partner with residents across the state who want to be part of shifting to cleaner transportation options. That's really the difference that this will make.
Great, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that we are approaching the top of the hour, but very generously, Commissioner Dykes and Deputy Commissioner Ugolito have agreed to stay on with us for a bit more to try to get to what turns out to be many questions. So we're going to keep going for another few minutes. And I just wanted to ask, since we're on the subject of money and kind of how that money is going to be spent, there's about, I think, a 400 million, at least 400 million deficit in just the cost to maintain Connecticut's transit and highways. Will any of the TC is a state of good repair? Will any of the TCI money be going towards that? And if so, how much? What percentage do you see would be earmarked for that?
So we don't want to presuppose how the funds are going to be utilized, right? It's going to be a discussion with communities, with the Equity Advisory Board, to determine how best to invest these proceeds to achieve the emissions reductions we need to see. Certainly some of that may include a lot of the pending or unfunded projects that we have in our capital plan. When you look at our capital plan, there's the capital plan, then there's a list called over program, which means there's no funds to do them. So there's a lot of great projects on there, and for the transit sector, as well as safety and congestion mitigation projects and highway and bridge side. So there's certainly a possibility, if that's where we can see the best and largest emissions reductions, and the communities and the participants of the Equity Advisory Board are interested in those, there's the opportunity to fund those. Governor Lamont has also proposed other funding mechanisms to support the Special Transportation Fund. He proposed a highway use fee, which is going to inject an additional $1.15 billion in capital spending over the next 5 years. So TCI is complementary to those efforts that Governor Lamont has also put forward as one package to addressing our transportation emissions and our transportation investment needs.
Great. And I think we've gotten a lot of questions about how, DOT and DEEP are working on plans for electric vehicles, for converting the state fleet to electric vehicles, for active transportation, bike and pedestrian plans. So can you just talk maybe for a minute or so about some of the plans that you have already underway that you're thinking about in relation to these programs? I know you've touched on them earlier.
I would love to. This is something that since Commissioner Giletti has come to the DOT, he has been working really closely with Commissioner Dykes and Commissioner Jabal at Administrative Services on this topic. And I'll let Commissioner Dykes talk a little bit about EO1 after I wrap up. But at the DOT, we have one of the largest fleets in state government. We know that. So we have started the process this year to begin to install EV charging infrastructure at our facilities. We will have online by the end of 2021, I think around 40 ports to charge level 2 chargers so that we can begin to transition our motor pool fleet over at the DOT. We're working really closely with DEEP and DAS to work with them to identify funding to allow us to do that at other state facilities. It's just critical for us to do that. And on the public transit side, we have 2 electric buses in the state. That's not enough, obviously. They're based in Bridgeport. It's the first ones in the state. They just came online a few months ago. We're getting 12 more this year, this calendar year. And we are committed to stopping the procurement of diesel buses for Connecticut Transit Fleet. We are in the process of planning out how we can convert the entire Connecticut Transit Fleet over to electric over the next 12 to 15 years as buses cycle out. But Commissioner Dykes, I don't know if you want to talk about EO1 or any of the other work you're doing.
Yeah. So DEEP issued an electric vehicle roadmap, which we developed last year and finalized and issued during the pandemic. It highlights a whole range of different things that the state can do to help support a conversion of fleets. And it's Garrett, DOT has been a great leader on this. Governor Lamont signed an executive order in 2019 that committed the state to make significant reductions within our own footprint of greenhouse gas emissions. We know that this can be a big cost saver as the folks who are responsible for fleet management across state government have been modeling and evaluating some of the savings that are possible with the conversion to electric vehicles. I want to say also that it's very, very important to emphasize that making sure that, that our electrification strategies that we're supporting at the department and across the administration are prioritizing equity and affordability for everyone for these types of vehicles if people choose to want to switch to an electric vehicle. We want to make sure that this is not something that these opportunities are accessible and affordable for everyone. And so the Cheaper board just recently, I believe it was last week, the week before, approved new incentives that will be in place for our popular electric vehicle rebate program that for the first time will provide those rebates for used vehicles. We want to spur a really robust secondary market for electric vehicles here in the state. We know that that's how many folks across the state purchase vehicles is on the used market. And so that was a gap that we saw in terms of providing for greater access to electric vehicles, and we're excited to be making progress in that respect. I also want to give a shout out to the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority under the great leadership of Chairman Marissa Gillette. PURA has been advancing a docket that will provide for more affordable access to EV charging infrastructure and really attractive rates for electric customers who install charging stations at home and so on. So PURA has been juggling many things this year. Their continued leadership on the charging side in that docket has been really, really great to see, and is going to provide, again, more affordable, more convenient access to home charging and other types of charging for electric vehicles that we know will be really critical for this transformation.
Great. If we could just ask 2 more questions here and then we'll wrap up. I do have a question about the timing of this. Obviously, there is, from many people's perspective, there is a sense of urgency, around the whole concept of climate change and any movement that we can make. But we're coming off a really tough year. A lot of people are struggling financially. The gas prices right now happen to be flying up, going up sharply even in the last month or so. So how important is it that we move on this right now? I don't think it's a now or never scenario, but can you just talk about why you're pushing for this at this time?
Sure. First off, the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The climate change doesn't take a day off. It doesn't pause. We have a limited window of time to reduce emissions in order to prevent more catastrophic acceleration of climate change through this century. So it's really, really critical for us to implement cost-effective programs that can help reduce those emissions. I think if there was one thing that I wish people better understood about how climate change works, is that you can't wait until things get too bad, right, to then start taking action, because those changes in the environment and what we'll call our environmental infrastructure are locked in and are irreversible. So, you know, we have to take the action now to prevent things from getting much, much worse over time. And the costs of inaction far, 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 far exceed the modest costs of reducing emissions today. So that's one reason for the urgency. Number two, very sensitive to, you know, the economic challenges that families and businesses across the state are experiencing as a result of this global pandemic and the associated economic downturn. It's important to point out, you know, that as we are really focused on supporting the resurgence of our economy and helping folks return to normal and regain the strength of and progress of our economy, this program would not start to impact any consumer prices until 2023. So, you know, when we are optimistic that much of the economic pain that we are feeling so acutely now will be, you know, mitigated, that will be on our way to a stronger recovery by that time period. But the third piece of urgency is we are poised right now that if we move forward with this program, we'll not only be able to capture emissions reductions here in Connecticut, but we'll be able to, by again partnering with the other states that have agreed to seek to implement the program, we'll be able to lock in emission reductions from their respective commitments, right? And so it's like leveraging our climate action, our progress on addressing air pollution will also lock in those commitments from those other states. So this is a very unique moment, and we really, this opportunity that we are presenting to the General Assembly has taken many years of negotiation for us to get to this point where the other states are willing to move forward with us. I'm not sure how that opportunity will, you know, to the extent to which that is available in future years if we don't move forward on this program today. And, you know, frankly, these benefits are so positive. You know, what this will mean in terms of supporting our economy, in terms of improving public health. You know, how can we, you know, look at our children, you know, look at our, you know, community members who have been struggling with respiratory illness, especially coming out of this pandemic that has highlighted how vulnerable communities are to the, you know, to the impacts of air pollution. How can we look at folks and say, this isn't worth it, when we know that the benefits of this program are so substantial? So we don't want to wait. We think this makes great sense for the state and for our planet. And that's why we think that this is the moment.
Great. And just one final question. You talked about a lot, you know, so you had some support actually from the oil industry. And you said during the presentation that the change would hopefully come more from cleaner fuels rather than lower mobility. Have you heard from them that, you know, they're ready to make those changes if they get those price signals?
Yes, actually, thanks for asking that question. When we talk about the urgency and the opportunity in this program, that's a theme that we hear, that we've been hearing from companies like British Petroleum or Beyond Petroleum, BP, who is a strong supporter of this program. That company, you know, they see how the energy transition that is coming, and they believe that, you know, from the shareholder perspective, that it's critical for their company to be part of the progress in order to make that transition and be delivering on cleaner transportation and energy sources going forward. We've heard it from the automakers. Many of the major automakers have reached out and are supportive of this program. You know, if you, if again, following the announcements just in the last few weeks, it's been so thrilling to see those commitments coming forward from GM, from Volvo, from Ford, from others who understand that the shift to electric vehicles is probably going to happen faster than we even anticipate. And they want to make sure that they're on the cutting edge of providing these cleaner vehicles into our economy. So, you know, they see the same future, and they see the value that this program and leadership in this program will provide for the state of Connecticut, and we're excited to be a part of it.
Well, Alec and I would like to thank you both for taking the time to address these issues and educate us all about the TCI program, what it means, and hopefully answering as many questions as possible. And for those who still have questions, we will reach out to the DOT and DEP to try to get some additional answers for you. But I just really wanted to say thank you, Commissioner Dykes. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Ucolito. And I hope that everyone found this to be a worthwhile hour plus, and we appreciate your extra time.
Thank you so much, Amy and Alec, for having us today. And thanks for everyone who's joined us. We're really glad to see the interest in this program, and for folks to hear from us what this can mean for the state of Connecticut. So we look forward to being part of this discussion going forward, and appreciate AAA's leadership in bringing us all together today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you
So much, both of you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Take care.